We're hearing more and more about how AI and other technologies are changing the way creatives are working and changing the content and the way it's being created. Does that worry you?
Well, I wouldn't be honest with you if I said that, it didn't worry me. When I first opened ChatGPT and saw that it could generate an email or could generate me a script within seconds, I did sweat a little bit.
Tejarah Talks.
Welcome to the Tejarah Talks podcast that brings you conversations and discussions with innovative and inspirational members of the Oman business and investment community. My name is Adham Seyyid, co-founder of the firm for business and economic consulting. I'm joined today by Dr. Ismail and Jamal Asmi. Welcome to the podcast. Dr. Muna, how about you tell us something about yourself and the work that you do?
I'm Ismail, the Dean of the Scientific College of Design. I'm also a board member on the Oman Association for Quality in Higher Education. And I've been the Dean for the past 18 years.
Jamal, how about yourself?
I'm a film producer and founder of Reality CG. The C is all about creativity and the G is all about being generative. So we produce films. We believe very strongly in the power of storytelling. And we believe that it has a massive impact on business. And, we pride ourselves in being an Omani team. We are the only US Emmy-nominated production company in Oman and have run a number of successful campaigns in the country.
Let me start with you, Dr. Muna, and ask the broad question. As we're talking about the creative and cultural industries, how would you define those industries, especially from your perspective as an academician and a practitioner in your area of expertise?
The creative industries are all the sectors that focus on creativity, talent. We talk about fashion design, graphic design, architecture, interior, culinary design, all these different sectors that focus on creativity, the skills, the talent, which is also referred to as the orange economy, since orange represents creativity.
Excellent. And is it in any ways that academic organizations, higher education organizations, special organizations focus on specific areas, or they look to provide a broad offering of the areas that you've mentioned?
Both, really. We focus on general design concepts, design basics, and then towards the end of the curricula, we focus on specializations and building required talents to practice. And
do you find, Dr. Muna, any areas that are more appealing for students or even professors who focus more specifically on, say, graphic design or architecture or fashion design, or are they well balanced within the uptake?
In Oman now, I think fine arts is taking over a bit, as well as the animation. I think both careers are taking a bit more attention from students than the other fields.
Excellent. Jamal, you're on the other end of the receiving end of that talent and skill coming through. And I'm sure your perspective of the creative industries comes from a different angle. Where do you see it? How do you see it evolving, whether it's locally or globally?
Well, I think it's great news that we have the Scientific College of Design, because ultimately we're a very talent-focused industry. The work we produce really requires individuals that understand the craft and are willing to embark on this lifelong journey. And what I can say is that over the last 5 years, there are some incredible talents here in Oman that are, I would say, globally competitive. And I think Oman itself is an incredibly special place because we're a melting pot of culture. And I'm a strong believer that, it's in the cultural diversity of a country that creativity benefits the most. And so I'm really excited that you guys are generating quality students, because obviously it helps me run our creative company.
Absolutely. So you're in production, and you've mentioned, generating much of this sort of product, if I may call it so. Where do you focus more on in that area when we think about the creatives? Production for campaigns, advertising and branding and whatnot, or production with a purpose, whether it's documentaries or any other type?
Thanks for the question, because I get to do a bit of a self-plug now. So there are really two core pillars to our business. The first is the creative aspect. So normally a company or an institution would come to us, essentially, and I don't want to sound too negative, but essentially with a communication challenge or problem or a perception issue they want to change. Perhaps they have a new product or service they want to market. Perhaps, the morale inside a company is a little bit low and they want to boost it and they want to use some internal comms to do that. So, what we do is understand the problem using design thinking and empathy. And then we work out how we can overcome the gap. And so there we generate ideas. And once the idea is solid and the client's happy and they're behind it, then we go to the second pillar, which is the generative pillar, which is now production. So typically it would be a film, it would be motion graphics, it would be 3D computer animation. And, we have a very talented team in-house. Again, I want to stress an Omani team, largely. And we have...
Let me stop you there, Jamal, for 1 second, because there's an important element of local talent playing a big role. But we're also aware that the global impact on the creatives is critically important. The diversity that you've mentioned, the discourse, academic and creative, is critically important. Are we finding that the talents you have, the talents that come out of colleges like the Scientific College of Design, are capable of that discourse?
Absolutely. I have no doubt that the creative talent that's being generated here locally is as good as anywhere else in the world. And in fact, I would say Oman regionally has done very well, and the creatives in Oman are very much appreciated abroad. And whenever we go outside the country and we work with other creatives, even very seasoned professionals, they're always surprised and amazed by the talent here in Oman, how serious they are. How much knowledge they've acquired. And I do believe we live in a very homogenous world. I mean, everybody has access, to the best and latest technology, to information. So there's no limitation. And I think Omanis have embraced learning and continuous learning.
Right. And I think, Dr. Muna, you work a lot of international collaborations, and whether artists from the world come to Oman, and whether you communicate with them and some of your faculty and students. What was that experience like, reflecting our experience with the rest of the world?
The college initiated a design symposium called Design Muscat about 6 years ago. And every 2 years we focus on a specific topic. And we invite artists and designers from all over the world. We invite them from Parsons University. We invite them from Belgium, France, Egypt, also the region, Saudi Arabia. And we discuss specific topics. And it was really an enriching experience for our students to see a comparison between what's happening in the international world and the similarity that's happening in our studios and in the classrooms. A nice comparison of the international engagements along with the local engagements here. So, for example, we had an Egyptian academician who talked to us about a specific project that they were implementing in Egypt, while we were doing here the same thing in Yeti project.
Yeah.
So it was a very enriching experience for our students to see this similarities between what's happening in the international world and what's happening in Oman.
And I understand, Dr. Muna, that there's been serious efforts from the college to get international accreditation as well for your programs.
Yes. Just to follow up on what Jamal was just saying, our academic programs have been accredited regionally from Jordan as well as from the US. We applied for the international program equivalency from NASA, the National Schools of Art and Design in the US. And we received a program equivalency, which signifies that our programs, academic programs, are equivalent to the American programs. So we're teaching the same similar curricula. We're teaching the practical side, the theoretical side, so they get both, as I said earlier, an introductory year of design basics. And then they start going into the specializations and starting their second year. So these academic programs are equivalent to international standards, and this is why they're at par.
And that's really where we can boast about those talents that are being homegrown, but are global citizens and creatives.
I want to add one more point here, that our students have received and they won international competitions. So we've won competitions on animation, photography competitions several times on the local scene as well as the international competitions. So this proves the standard of our graduates.
And that's very exciting to hear that we have that local kind of sort of churn, if you like, to bring out the talent and skill. So now that we've scoped the creatives industries in a general term, I'd like to turn our attention to the impact and the relevance of the creative industries for business and for the local community and obviously the global community. So now that we've spoken about the various types of creative industries and the talent that is required and where we can find that talent, Jamal, what kind of impact do the creative industries have on individuals, communities, societies?
I think a great question and an important one. The impact is massive, but I also had a question maybe for you, Dr. Mono, because I've noticed there is a stigmatism, or there was at least going 15 years back. Reality CG has been in operation for over 20 years. We've seen change. And historically, I was aware of a lot of the youth were wanting to get into this field, whether it was graphic design, filmmaking, but often there was a concern from parents that there wouldn't be a career for them, and that they should consider the more traditional paths like becoming an engineer or a doctor. I'm curious if things have really changed. Have you noticed a change?
They have definitely. Not as evident. Starting 18 years ago, maybe this was the fact. But now I think people are much more aware of the creative industries and what the career opportunities and career path that the students will get after they graduate. So we even have students who've started their careers while still studying at the college. So I don't think it's as evident.
So what I'm hearing is that you're seeing pathways from those educational streams and creatives into careers and economic opportunities, which brings me back to you, Jamal. How did you come about creating Reality CG as a creative? What was the spark, if you may, that started this whole thing?
So it's not necessarily a story that we tend to tell at Reality CG, but the origin of Reality was born from a situation at home whereby, my dad could no longer afford to send us to private school. And we myself and my older brother Anwar took a hiatus. And with Dad's encouragement and a bit of guidance, we established Reality. And at that time, this was during the early 90s. At that time, it was a green field. I mean, nobody was doing much in terms of computer graphics. And here we are. We quickly gained some good clients. We're able to visualize buildings in 3D and produce animation. And it really took off. And both Anwar and I went and obviously finished our studies and came back in 2002 and have been working since. But I wanted to also address your first question a little bit more about the impact, because whilst, yes, the creative industries do generate jobs, they do contribute to the GDP, certainly the figures show that there are more jobs, say, in the creative industries than telecoms or the automotive industry. However, I don't feel the direct money that the companies necessarily make is the impact. I think the impact is that the creative industries empower and help other industries to perform better. So if you consider the example of a fuel retailer, what is the difference between one fuel retailer and another? Essentially, they're the same product. So what you have remaining is the perception around that product. And that perception is driven by creatives. It's essential for business. I like to point to one particular example. We produced a corporate film for one of our clients without naming names. Prior to that film, they were struggling to secure a JV, which would have been significant for their business. Right. And they were trying to secure a JV with a company that was 10 times their size. And their team wasn't able to secure that deal. We'd produced a film. It was done very well. We'd worked very closely with our client to develop strong messaging and produce something that was great. And lo and behold, the doors opened after that film was shared with their partner. So creative media can open doors to business. And Oman is ripe for storytelling. Oman is an incredible place to tell stories. We're a rich culture. We're a diverse culture. And I think this is also one of the reasons why your students are winning awards. It's because Oman is just a great place to be a creative. So
right. And I think that point is very critical, but I want to take us back to the economic impact, because one of the key elements that are often being put out there are arguments that the creatives have something to add to livelihoods, especially when we talk about not just companies, but freelancers. And this brings us closer to the generational discussion and preferences. But are we noticing those trends, Dr. Muna, where you've said some of your students have secured, the first step in their career? Is that because they're in the creative industry, or are they just smart, talented, and skillful students?
I think they found an opportunity. And now the government is making support for freelancers in Oman. So the National Employment Program is collaborating with the Ministry of Labor, and they came up with a Freelancer Oman program where freelancers are going to get support. They're going to register and the platform, and they will get priority for government projects. So they're getting actually support on both levels of financial
Jamal
support.
is not very happy with that, though, because they're going to be competing against his services, right? But it does open up the field and creates niches for individuals to employ those.
Definitely. And we see architects doing product design. Look at Frank Gehry and Zaha Hadid, an architect designing a bracelet or different products. Here in Oman, we have Amal al-Raisi for a fashion designer that was a very successful business, which is actually exporting to the UK. We also have Amal Al-Jamali, who is working on fashion design, furniture design. So we've had also artists coming up with niches in the market, such as Safiya Al-Bahlani, Saud Al-Hanini, Tahra Fida. These artists actually put their talents and their artistic talents in products.
Which is great to hear that Omani creatives are. Jamal, any names that come to mind, maybe in your field or?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of photographers and filmmakers who have had a huge impact both locally and abroad. Chindi comes to mind. He goes by the name of Chindi. He really, has been involved in some major projects with major brands, global brands overseas. And his talent has been well recognized, and he's shaping, I would go as far as to say, he's shaping and making changes even abroad. So there's plenty of local talent. And because of the way, I would say, social media has made creativity more, let's say, it's you can collaborate more easily. There's a lot of freedom and cross-pollination. So, you have Omanis who are working with foreign people and people all around the world to create new things in the fields of music, in art, design, in film.
I wanted to mention Maysal Houthi. Maysal Houthi's project on Oman in Focus and how she's using that film to showcase Oman's inhabitants. And I think she's doing a really nice job.
Which is not very traditional in Oman, that we do documentaries that would hopefully reach into global resonance as well. So there are multiple ways we can think of the creative industries as creating impact, and perhaps fundamentally it's a story that we want to tell. So the next thing I want to turn our attention to is the generational impact of the creative industries. Are we moving from the traditional, and I'll start with you, Jamal, to what we think today is the progressive?
I think a lot of change is happening. I do think that the media landscape has moved and continues to move. However, and I think Dr. Mani, you would agree that the sort of the principles that are used in communication still stand, but the mediums are changing. So, print, billboard, whilst yes, still relevant, maybe less so. If you look at the youth, 99.9% of the youth have a smartphone. They spend 3 to 4 hours a day looking at contents. They're on platforms such as, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. So people are no longer going to the television to tune in, but they're turning to their phones. And so the channels which people are receiving information have changed, and accordingly the media has too. I believe that we're even moving more into moving pictures. So film is becoming more and more relevant. It's said that 50% of say Generation Z, they're on Instagram, and the claim is they have an attention span of 8 seconds, which isn't true. It's just that they evaluate things quickly and move on. So really, to be effective in this day and age, you have to capture attention quickly. And I would say that, effective communication is about attention, and then it's about delivering a message. The youth receive around 10,000 messages a day, and they have to make quick decisions about whether they're going to stay the course and learn more and read more or watch more, or whether they have to move on. So typically within 8 seconds, which is all you have to make an impact, people will either decide to continue or disembark and look at something else. There was a campaign that was done which I think was very effective at gaining attention, and that was done by Jindal Shadid. They're well known in their industry and well respected.
Which is the steel industry.
Exactly. In I believe they have a facility in Sahar, and they're well known in their industry. However, they're not known by the average Joe in the public sphere, and they produced a campaign which made them a household name overnight. And I think they've achieved that because they grabbed the attention. They did something in a way which I think is quite risky. And, I'm always trying to encourage my clientele to take those risks because that is what will garner you interest. But of course, once you have that attention, you have to deliver a relevant message.
Absolutely. And I think that's critical. And perhaps I'll come to you, Dr. Mani, on this point and ask if creativity, art and design and whatever comes with, needs to have any constraints when we're talking about the practical side, the applied side. And is that very different from what you do, for example, with your students? And there are no bounds.
I'm going to differ a bit from what Jamal's opinion. Not really boundaries, but requirements. So, or at least we call it in academia requirements. Creatives, I think, need specific requirements to shape a design problem. And then they go about solving it with their own talents, and they can need to come up with a concept, and then they go through the design process.
Now, do you find a generational difference as we're talking about Gen Zs? And do they like those requirements, or they want to have more freedom to express themselves, especially with the digital tools available and the bigger audience that they can reach?
Yeah, they struggle with it a bit in the beginning, especially that they're used to all these tools. So they want to really rush to the computer right away. While previously we were challenged pushing the students towards the computers, now we're trying to say, no, let's start with coming up with a concept, with hand sketches first, and then you go to the tool. So it's a different approach now that the creatives are taking. And I think this is because Gen Z are well aware of the different computer programs even before they hit college.
So could this generation be self-taught and plug into the freelance scene and be able to do things very differently because they're enabled through technology? Is that something you can see happening?
Yes, this is something that we are working on in academia. And I think the pandemic really accelerated that. Students are learning now to be self-learners, peer-oriented learners. They work together, they learn, and they teach each other. Rather than we don't have that lecture atmosphere anymore. And I think academia is changing because of during the pandemic. And the transformation to the online platforms. So the students, there's no point now in lecturing students. They have the lecture, they can go see it. Let's use the class time and something else. So we're actually covering more material. We're trying to keep up with the industry, what's happening in the computer programs, these applications. We're trying to integrate the fourth industrial revolution skills, which also we're addressing. Here in Oman now we have the Oman National Framework for Future Skills. So we're also trying to align the academic programs towards these skills. What are the required skills for AI and integrating AI and the academic programs? So we're trying to integrate motion systems or visual effects. All these issues are now related to AI.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Mani, you've mentioned some interesting technological developments that are changing the way we interact with the creative scene, if you like. But something caught my attention earlier on that you said many of your students are also turning to the fine arts which may seem to many of us abstract. Is that a divergence, or the fine arts is, with these kind of technologies, again, is converging and there is value created from these fine arts?
No, they're converging. They're converging, and now also we're focusing on interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary education system. So the architecture student needs to be aware of the animation, some of the animation that would help them, and that would help them show their project. The photography students need to be aware of what's happening in the fashion design industry. So this integration, I think, is what's required in the next stage, integrating specific skills from different fields. And I think this is what happens in real life, if I'm not mistaken, where you have different teams with different backgrounds working on a project.
Absolutely. Jamal, I'll come to you on the point of technological advances and developments. And we're hearing more and more about how AI and other technologies are changing the way creatives are working and changing the content and the way it's being created. Does that worry you?
Well, I wouldn't be honest with you if I said that, it didn't worry me. When I first opened ChatGPT and saw that it could generate an email or could generate me a script within seconds, I did sweat a little bit, because there's a copywriter in me, and I know how much labor it takes to generate something like that. Having said that, having had the opportunity to work a bit more with some of these tools, because there are tools now like Midjourney, which can generate images. Mm-hmm. You just simply have a command prompt and type the word imagine, and then with a few keystrokes and an enter button, within literally less than a minute, you have a beautiful piece of artwork that could inspire a new direction. Now, where I see it, honestly, having used it, I think, because often the case when you've not used it yet, you have more questions. But I think some of those questions have been addressed. And how I feel is that it augments the artist. Mm-hmm. It speeds up the process. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to see Avatar 2 yet.
Not yet. I hear it's a very long movie. So
okay, 3 hours. I heard the director's cut is going to be 9 hours long. But I think it's worth the 3 hours. It's an amazing film, rich in computer-generated imagery, very technically advanced. And it took, I think, 5 years of production, but the sort of window of time was 13 years. That production time could probably be reduced by about 80% going forward. Wow. Thanks to certain tools which have been generated. So there's a startup in Ireland.
So where is the creativity? I recall our discussions with friends and family about how CGI has changed the way we watch movies, for example, and how we interact in green screens and the authenticity of that experience. And does that change the meaning of creativity and creatives? Does it make it more technical rather than art?
It's a great question. I believe that the creative industries are today a marriage of different disciplines. You have to have the creative vision to begin with at the start. So Avatar had to be imagined. The world had to be imagined. The characters, the storyline. The music had to be composed by someone. Now technology comes along and helps us realize those visions. So I'm very excited because the youth isn't afraid of technology. They've grown up with it. So it's not a barrier. And as you mentioned, they jump onto new tools very quickly. They're self-learners. No longer do I have to necessarily attend a university in order to learn a tool. I go online, go to YouTube. There'll be 100 tutorials.
But where is the authenticity from the employer side of things? Because that typically becomes a barrier. So I come up to you without a degree, but I say I can do 1 or 2 or 3.
Yep.
How do you verify that and trust that I'll be a productive member of your team?
Okay, that's a great question. And I believe that fundamental education, core understanding of art, design, culture is important. People who understand fundamentals like color theory, for example, and composition, an appreciation of the arts and where it all came from, the history, all of these things matter. But ultimately, the work speaks for itself. So when somebody comes to our studio, even without necessarily the relevant qualifications, but has a portfolio that showcases their abilities, their skills, we're very open. And by the way, we collaborate a lot with freelancers. So it's no longer about whether you work in a specific company or whether you're a freelancer. It's about what you can bring. What skills do you have that can add value? And I think we're very lucky because we can work with, regardless of age, ethnicity, geographical position or location. You're able to work with everyone and anyone.
I totally agree. And I want to add that AI is used as a tool rather than a replacement of the creatives. And I think this is why the creatives really are excited and looking forward to more technology. How now the issue is copyright issues and copycatting. And one of our challenges where we used to use Turnitin and TinEye, we now have to come up with programs to catch plagiarism and to catch all these computer-generated images.
But what if it wasn't copycat, plagiarism and whatnot? But to what degree would you assess a student on creativity if it's AI-assisted or whatever tool-assisted sort of mechanism to produce that work of art? Or where do you draw the line as an academic?
I think we draw the line on the idea itself, the concept, and the progression. So we're no longer going to assess a student on the end product because the end product is there. It's not their actual work. Most probably we will focus on the introductory bit. What inputs did the student put in the project rather than the end product and the finishing and the presentation since it's already done for them.
So effectively, the current generation is going to be process-oriented rather than just end product. It's the how rather than the what, which I think is exciting to think about. That's where perhaps creativity plays a bigger role.
I think to add also to your point, my understanding is that some colleges are reverting back to pen and paper and getting rid of the laptop during examinations and tasks. Because ultimately, whilst it is a tool that everyone can use, if you want to assess someone, I think that's perhaps one of the easier ways, is remove the technology from the room, let people originate from themselves,
And I think that is a well worth exercise for all of us, usually as we deal with more technology. Dr. Muna, I'd like to take us to a bit more about the current generation and inclusion. The current generation wants to be included if we're talking about Gen Z, but there are those in society that are unable to for various reasons. You have a special program in the college that works on that and works on using technology, obviously, in the process. Could you reflect on that experience?
At the Scientific College of Design, we developed a graphic design program for the hearing impaired students. And they're about actually to graduate in June, inshallah. It was a rewarding experience to see these students generate work that was as equivalent as the speaking students, and even better sometimes. So they're able to pick up on skills, even though it's a graphic design program, but some of them picked up on photography. So they took a couple of photography classes and then they started taking also jobs. We're working now on actually starting a new program for the hearing impaired, as well as a program for the students with learning disabilities. to include everyone in the community. And I think this is one of the social impact of the creative industry, is the inclusion of different people in society.
And in many ways, I suppose the creative industries are tools to communicate through various ways of doing that. Jamal, how do you feel about this inclusion element, where you on the receiving end, demanding these skills and talents, working with people who have certain disabilities? Do you find that integration easier because the creative arts allows you to be more open-minded about such integration?
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, what we value is talent and skills. And, you know, we don't, you know, in the creative industry, and what I love so much is that there is a lot of freedom. There's a lot of liberty. You know, and as a business owner, you know, you have the honor of being able to determine how to hire. And there are no boundaries and there are no limitations. It's simply what a person can bring to the table that matters. Not who they are, not whether they have a disability. None of those things ultimately matter. And I on this sort of on the path towards creativity, I wanted to share the idea of meaningful work, because I believe that the challenges which the creative industries present are very exciting, and people should pay attention to that, because it can be a very rewarding experience. You can earn a living. You know that you can be paid well in this field, but I think more than that, you can have there's never a dull day. Every day you come to work, you might be working on something brand new in a different industry. It's a very exciting field, and there's a chap by the name of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He's the godfather of positive psychology, and he wrote this theory of flow. And if you could imagine Michael Jordan, for example, amazing basketball player, could play for hours, and he would forget time. Whilst he was training, practicing, he would forget time. And that's when you know you're in flow. And the artists that we have, the designers that we have at work, I often see how they lose themselves within their work. And I'm sure you see this with your students.
Yes.
You know, and they derive a lot of pleasure from being creative and exercising their capacity. So I think it's a wonderful field to enter.
Sounds exciting.
I think I agree with you, and I think one of the reasons that it's exciting and it's so pleasurable, that people use their senses, they use their memories, their traditions, their identity in it. And I think this is what makes really the creative industries more rewarding and pleasurable.
So let me in some ways wrap up here and think about, I like the meaningful work, but I'd like to take it one step further and say creative industries for good. We're talking about sustainable development goals. We're talking about climate change, societal challenges. Could the creative industries in various forms and shapes provide solutions that the scientists, the engineers, and the economists and everyone else could not provide? Jamal?
Yeah, I think ultimately what we're talking about is making change. And to make change, which is very hard, when we talk about changing people's attitudes, behaviors, because ultimately to build a sustainable world, we do need to make change. Now, how we make change is by shaping our environment and by understanding why we need to make those changes. Who better to communicate that than creatives? Who better to design the spaces that we need to live in? Who better to change the products that we use every day than creatives? I believe that creatives need scientists and technologists, and I believe that there's also a flip side. I think we all need each other. And I believe that we're getting there. The appreciation for the creative industries is now a mainstay in Oman. I mean, I think there's definitely a change, and we're well respected and appreciated. And I think that Oman itself has an incredibly bright future because we have the right culture to make those changes.
Absolutely. Dr. Muna, I understand that your efforts and the college's efforts in Design Muscat has focused on sustainability. How have you managed to merge the creative industry and the talent and the skill that you have at the college with that concept using Design Muscat?
We made the major theme of Design Muscat last year focus on sustainability. And we invited practicing artists and designers from Oman and international artists also to showcase what they do on practices, changing practices and rethinking the practices of art and design towards sustainability. So we've had artists, not just lectures, but also workshops. So we've had artists that conducted workshops on using espresso capsules, recycling espresso capsules to compose different artworks. We've had a group of artists from Al-Sharqiyya, and it was really nice project. 16 artists from Al-Sharqiyya worked on a project using tree barks. We've had an Italian artist who recycled marbles and stones and showed how you can get these marbles and stones from different factories and come up with artistic compositions. So we used Design Muscat to showcase our students and to the youth that you have a role towards sustainability, you have a role towards the environment, and you can easily rethink your practices towards that goal. And so I think the creative industries have a role to play towards sustainability.
That sounds very, very exciting, and I hope for more success, inshallah.
Thank you.
Dr. Muna, Jamal, it's been exciting listening to you and your experiences. Thank you very much for sharing those. Do you have any final words for anyone who's interested in joining the creative arts, the Gen Zs, or the next generation after? Jamal?
Look, I mean, the youth are shaping the future and are really now the consumer power. And very soon, I think, with Oman's very young population, their voice is more pronounced than ever, and their importance is more pronounced than ever. With the surge in technology, with the adoption of the creative industries as a mainstay in Oman, I think we're living in incredibly exciting times. I think that we're going to see a lot of changes. I think that Oman brings something very special to the table as far as an environment that encourages collaboration, freedom of thought, creativity. I believe that you'll find new businesses, new products set up that will actually not only affect us, but affect the world. So I'm very excited about the future.
Dr. Muna?
I believe the creative industries in Oman now has great potential. And I think the environment is the serene environment that we have here in Oman that's conducive. The government support, I think, makes joining the creative industries much more exciting now. And I believe that it's the right time.
Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to support the Tejarah Talks podcast, you'll find us on social media. Links are available in the description below.
Tejarah Talks.